Female CEO mocked a single dad veteran. Fix this engine and I'll marry you. Then he did. She laughed at the broken man in greasy boots. But when the impossible engine roared to life, the crowd gasped, and her cruel joke turned into a promise she could never escape. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Reynolds Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Jack Reynolds wiped his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a small streak of grease above his weathered eyes. His calloused fingers worked methodically on the pickup truck's transmission, each movement precise and purposeful. From her small desk in the corner, 8-year-old Lily's pencil scratched against paper as she worked on her math homework. The desk itself was a testament to Jack's creativity. He'd built it himself from spare parts and wooden pallets, making sure his daughter always had a safe place to study while he worked. "Dad?" Lily's voice carried across the garage. "What's 7 times 8? Jack smiled without looking up from his work. "Try breaking it down like we practiced, sweetheart. What's 7 times 4, then double it?" He heard the gentle tap of her pencil as she thought it through. 28 plus 28. 56. That's my girl. Pride swelled in his chest. These quiet moments with Lily were what he lived for, what made every long day worth it. The familiar scent of motor oil and metal hung in the air, mingling with the coffee from Jack's thermos. His mind wandered briefly to his time in the Army, where he'd first learned to fix engines. The military had taught him discipline and attention to detail, skills that served him well both as a mechanic and a father. A bell chimed as Tommy, his part-time helper, walked in through the front office. "Morning, Mr. Reynolds." "Morning, Lily." "Hi, Tommy." Lily waved enthusiastically. Jack nodded in greeting, reaching for a different wrench. "Tommy, can you check the inventory in the back? We're running low on filters." As Tommy disappeared into the storage room, Jack's eyes fell on the photo taped to the wall near his toolbox. It showed him in his Army uniform, standing proud and tall. Some days the memories were harder than others, but he'd learned to focus on the present, on what mattered most, providing a stable life for Lily. "Dad, look!" Lily held up her completed math worksheet. "All done!" Jack wiped his hands on a shop rag and walked over to examine her work. The numbers were neat and organized, just like he'd taught her. "Perfect job, kiddo. Your teacher will be proud." The phone in the office rang, and Jack moved to answer it. Tommy emerged from the back just then, clipboard in hand. "I'll get it, Mr. Reynolds." A moment later, Tommy returned with wide eyes. "Sir, that was the Hart Company. They're confirming their entire fleet service for this evening. 15 vehicles." Jack's heart skipped a beat. The Hart Company was one of the biggest corporations in the region. This contract could mean real stability, maybe even enough to start a college fund for Lily. He kept his voice steady, not wanting to show his anxiety. "What time are they bringing them in?" 6 p.m. They need them all checked and serviced by tomorrow afternoon." Tommy looked nervous. "That's a lot of work, Mr. Reynolds." Jack nodded, already mentally preparing for the long night ahead. "We'll manage." He glanced at Lily, who was now reading a book, her dark hair falling forward over her face, just like her mother's used to. The morning wore on as Jack finished with the pickup truck. His movements were efficient, but never rushed. Quality work was his signature, something he'd learned both in the service and in the years since. Between repairs, he helped Lily with her reading, listened to her stories about school, and shared their simple packed lunch of sandwiches and apple slices. By mid-afternoon, Mrs. Chen from the diner next door brought over a fresh pot of coffee. She often looked out for them, treating Lily like a granddaughter. "Big night ahead, Jack. I heard the Hart Company trucks are coming." "News travels fast," Jack said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Small town." Mrs. Chen smiled, patting Lily's head. "You need me to watch this little one tonight?" Jack checked his watch. "If you wouldn't mind, it's going to be a long evening. You know it's never a problem." Mrs. Chen turned to Lily. "We'll make dumplings together, okay?" Lily's face lit up. "Can we make the purple ones again?" As the afternoon sun began to dip, Jack started preparing the shop for the evening ahead. He organized his tools, cleared space for the incoming vehicles, and made sure all the diagnostic equipment was ready. Years of military service had taught him that preparation was half the battle. Tommy helped him clean up while Lily packed her school books. The shop gradually took on an almost surgical precision, everything in its place, ready for action. Jack couldn't help but think of pre-mission preparations, though he quickly pushed those memories aside. At 5:30, Jack walked Lily next door to Mrs. Chen's. He knelt down to her level, straightening her jacket. "Be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? I'll come get you when I'm done." Lily threw her arms around his neck. "You'll do great, Daddy. You're the best fixer in the whole world." Jack hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. These were the moments that kept him going, that reminded him why every struggle was worthwhile. "I love you, sweetheart. Love you too, Daddy." Back in his small office, Jack changed into a clean work shirt and splashed some water on his face. The mirror reflected a man with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there during his service years, but also showed the quiet strength that had gotten him through tough times. He thought about the upcoming evening, about the Heart Company, and what this contract could mean. It wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about proving himself, about showing that a single dad with a military background could succeed on his own terms. In the growing quiet of his shop, Jack Reynolds stood ready, his tools laid out before him like a soldier's equipment before battle. He was tired from a full day's work, but determination burned steady in his chest. Whatever challenges the evening might bring, he would face them with the same dignity and dedication that had carried him this far. Looking at the clock, he took a deep breath. 5:45. The Heart Company vehicles would arrive soon, and with them, perhaps, a chance to build something better for Lily's future. The morning bustle at Reynolds Auto Repair was unlike anything Jack had seen before. A line of gleaming luxury vehicles stretched down the usually quiet street, their polished surfaces reflecting the early sunlight. Each car probably cost more than he made in 2 years. Jack straightened his Navy work shirt, the same one he'd worn for the past 3 years, and walked out to greet the first driver. The man wore a crisp uniform with a corporate logo and handed over a set of keys with practiced efficiency. "Morning," Jack said with a polite nod. "I'll need you to fill out these forms." He kept his voice steady and professional, the same tone he'd used when giving orders in the Army. One by one, the drivers brought their vehicles forward. Jack directed them to different bays, organizing the workflow with military precision. His regular customers' beaten-up trucks and family sedans sat waiting at the far end of the lot. But today's priority was clear. The morning sun had climbed higher when a sleek black Mercedes pulled up. The car purred to a stop, and the door opened with deliberate grace. A woman stepped out, her high heels clicking against the concrete floor. Her tailored suit probably cost more than all the tools in Jack's shop combined. Vivian Hart. Jack recognized her from the business magazines Lily sometimes used for school projects. She surveyed the shop like a general inspecting enemy territory, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Miss Hart," Jack said, stepping forward. "Welcome to Reynolds Auto Repair." Her eyes flicked to his name tag, then to the grease stains on his hands. "Mr. Reynolds." Her voice was cool and precise. "I trust you can handle our fleet maintenance without complications?" "Yes, ma'am. We'll take good care of your vehicles." A slight smirk touched her lips. "We'll see about that." She followed him as he began his inspection, her heels echoing through the shop. Jack could feel her watching his every move, evaluating, judging. He'd faced enemy fire with less tension in his shoulders. When they reached the last car, an older model with a custom engine, Jack frowned. He recognized the symptoms immediately. A deep knocking sound, metal grinding against metal. "This one's got serious engine damage," he explained, pointing to the worn components. "It's beyond repair. You'll need a full replacement." Vivian's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Beyond repair? For you, perhaps." She turned to address the small crowd of drivers and mechanics that had gathered. "Gentlemen, it seems our local mechanic is admitting defeat before even trying." Jack felt heat rise in his neck, but kept his voice level. "Ma'am, with all due respect, no, please." She cut him off, her smile cold and mocking. "Let's make this interesting." She stepped closer, her perfume mixing with the shop's familiar scents of oil and metal. "Fix this engine, the one everyone says is impossible to repair, and I'll marry you." The shop fell silent. A few nervous chuckles broke out among the drivers. Jack could see it in their faces. They were waiting for him to back down, to accept the humiliation. But Jack Reynolds hadn't backed down in combat, and he wouldn't back down now. He met her gaze steadily, refusing to flinch from the challenge in her eyes. "I'll look at it tonight," he said quietly. Vivian's smile faltered for just a moment. She hadn't expected that response. Tonight? How ambitious. She turned away, addressing her staff. Well, we'll see what our humble mechanic can achieve, won't we? The day passed in a blur of oil changes and routine maintenance. Jack worked steadily, methodically, while Vivian's challenge hung in the air like storm clouds. When evening came, he drove home to have dinner with Lily, helped her with homework, and tucked her into bed with a story. Only then did he return to the shop. The building was dark and quiet now. No audience to witness either his triumph or failure. Jack rolled up his sleeves and pulled his toolbox closer to the car with the impossible engine. The overhead light cast harsh shadows as he began his examination. This was familiar territory, just him and a broken machine that needed fixing. No mockery, no judgment, just the honest work of hands and mind. He spread out his tools and got to work. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around Reynolds Auto Repair like a heavy blanket. Jack sat alone in the dimly lit garage, staring at the engine that had sparked Vivian Hart's cruel challenge. His weathered hands traced the metal components while his mind worked through each possibility. The smell of oil and metal brought him back to dusty days in Afghanistan, where keeping vehicles running meant the difference between life and death. His old sergeant's voice echoed in his memory. When you're stuck in the desert with a broken-down Humvee, there ain't no manual to save you. You gotta think different, Reynolds. Jack pulled his toolbox closer, the familiar weight of each wrench and socket bringing comfort. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. A thermos of black coffee sat untouched beside him. He was too focused to even think about drinking it. All right, he muttered to himself. Let's see what you're trying to tell me. His fingers moved methodically over the engine block, reading its story like Braille. Something wasn't adding up. The diagnostics all pointed to catastrophic failure, but Jack's instincts told him otherwise. Vivian Hart's smirking face flashed in his mind. The way she'd looked down her nose at him, as if his work-worn hands somehow made him less worthy. His jaw tightened, but not from anger, from determination. This wasn't about proving her wrong. This was about showing Lily that dignity came from within, not from other people's approval. A memory surfaced. A broken-down tank in Kandahar, everyone else ready to abandon it. But Jack had spotted something others missed, a workaround that saved both the vehicle and the mission. He'd learned then that conventional solutions weren't always the answer. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 a.m. as Jack disassembled the engine piece by piece. Each component told part of the story. But it wasn't until he reached the timing belt that everything clicked. His eyes widened with recognition. Well, I'll be damned, he whispered. The problem wasn't in the obvious places everyone else had checked. It was hiding in plain sight, masked by misleading symptoms. Just like in the army, the real issue was camouflaged. Jack's hands moved with renewed purpose now. He reached for tools without looking, his movements precise and deliberate. The quiet of the empty garage was broken only by the subtle sounds of metal on metal and his occasional soft grunt of effort. As he worked, he thought about Lily sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Henderson's house next door. His daughter never doubted him, never saw him as just a struggling mechanic. In her eyes, he was still a hero. That pure faith meant more to him than any CEO's approval ever could. Hours passed like minutes. The first hints of dawn began to paint the sky outside. But Jack barely noticed. He was deep in that familiar zone he'd known in the service, where nothing existed except the problem at hand and the solution taking shape under his hands. At 6:47 a.m., Jack took a deep breath and stepped back. Everything was reassembled, each part exactly where it needed to be. His back ached from hunching over the engine all night, and his hands were stained with grease despite his careful wiping. Time for truth, he said softly, reaching for the key. The moment stretched out as he turned it in the ignition. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life with a sound so clean it was almost musical. A smile spread across Jack's face, the first real one in days. He didn't smile because he'd proven Vivian Hart wrong. He smiled because he'd stayed true to who he was, a man who fixed things, who didn't give up, who showed his daughter that hard work and perseverance mattered more than quick judgments and cruel words. The engine purred smoothly in the early morning light, its steady rhythm filling the garage. Jack stood there, listening to its healthy sound, knowing he'd done what others had declared impossible. Not for glory or revenge, but because it was who he was, a man who kept trying until he found a way. The morning sun streamed through the shop's windows, casting long rectangles of light across the garage floor. Jack wiped his hands on a clean shop rag, his eyes tired but satisfied as he looked at the restored engine. Hours of meticulous work had paid off. The sound of expensive car tires crunching on gravel announced the arrival of Vivian Hart and her entourage. Jack straightened his work shirt and stood tall, calm determination evident in his stance. Through the open bay doors, he watched as Vivian emerged from her luxury sedan, wearing another impeccable business suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Good morning, Miss Hart," Jack said evenly as she approached, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. A cluster of corporate employees followed behind her, their curious whispers echoing in the large space. Vivian's perfectly painted lips curved into a condescending smile. "Mr. Reynolds, I trust you had an entertaining evening with our little challenge? Why don't I show you what I found?" Jack's voice remained steady, professional. He gestured toward the engine. "By all means." Vivian crossed her arms, clearly expecting to witness a failed attempt. Jack moved to the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a smooth, powerful purr that filled the garage. Several of the employees gasped. Jack let it run for a moment, then stepped out and lifted the hood. "The main issue was here," he explained, pointing to a specific component. "But there were several smaller problems contributing to the failure. I replaced the worn parts and modified the intake system to prevent future issues." The crowd of employees pressed closer, their expressions shifting from skepticism to amazement. One of the company mechanics shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible," the man muttered. "We all said it couldn't be done." "Sometimes you have to think beyond the manual," Jack said quietly, remembering his sergeant's words. "In the Army, we learned to solve problems with whatever we had available." A spontaneous burst of applause erupted from the employees. Jack noticed Vivian's confident smile faltering for the first time, her carefully maintained composure cracking just slightly. "Well," she said, forcing a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes, "I suppose congratulations are in order, Mr. Reynolds. Though I hope you don't expect me to honor that ridiculous proposition from yesterday." "No, ma'am," Jack replied, his dignity intact. "I didn't do this for that reason. I did it because you said it couldn't be done, and I knew better." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Vivian seemed unsure how to respond. Jack saw something flash across her face. Respect, perhaps, or uncertainty. It vanished quickly behind her professional mask. The employees continued to examine the engine, talking excitedly among themselves. Jack noticed how they looked at him differently now, with admiration instead of pity or indifference. Vivian pulled him aside, lowering her voice. "Mr. Reynolds, our company fleet division has been having some persistent issues with maintenance and repairs. Perhaps we could arrange a short-term consulting position to benefit from your expertise?" Jack recognized the offer for what it was, her attempt to save face and maintain control of the situation. But he also thought of Lily, of her college fund that was still too empty, of the stable hours this might provide compared to the unpredictable workflow of his shop. "What would the terms be?" he asked carefully. 3 months to start. You'd advise our maintenance team, help establish better protocols." Vivian's tone was businesslike now, but less dismissive than before. "The compensation would be substantial." Jack nodded slowly. "I'd need to arrange coverage for my shop, and any schedule would have to work around my daughter's school hours." "We can be flexible," Vivian said, though the words seemed to cost her something. "Shall we discuss the details in my office tomorrow morning?" "Yes, ma'am, I'll be there." As Vivian gathered her employees to leave, Jack caught fragments of their excited conversations about the miracle mechanic. But his thoughts were already with Lily, imagining her face when he told her about the new opportunity. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about building a better future for his daughter. The car engine started up outside, and soon the sound of tires on gravel faded away. Jack stood in his quiet garage, the morning sun now high enough to eliminate the long shadows. The fixed engine sat before him, a testament to what patience, skill, and determination could accomplish. Despite his exhaustion, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction, not from impressing Vivian Hart, but from staying true to himself and his values. The small kitchen in Jack's modest home filled with the warm aroma of spaghetti and meatballs, Lily's favorite dinner. She sat at their well-worn wooden table, swinging her legs as she twirled pasta onto her fork. Jack watched her from across the table, his own plate barely touched as his mind wandered to the day's events. "Daddy," Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "What does consulting mean? Is that like being a doctor for cars?" Jack smiled at her simple but clever comparison. "Sort of, honey. It means I'll be helping Miss Hart's company fix their cars better, teaching their mechanics some things I've learned over the years. Like when you help me with my math homework?" Lily's eyes brightened with understanding. "Exactly like that." Jack reached across the table to wipe a spot of sauce from her chin. "I'll still have our shop, but for a few months I'll also work at their big building downtown." Lily chewed thoughtfully for a moment. "Will we have more money? Could I maybe get new shoes for gym class?" The question squeezed Jack's heart. He'd noticed her current pair was getting tight, but they hadn't quite reached payday yet. "Yes, sweetheart. This job will help us have a bit more money. We can go shopping this weekend. And maybe," Lily hesitated, pushing a meatball around her plate, "maybe we could get ice cream sometimes? Like Tommy's family does?" Jack reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. "I think we can manage that. But remember what we always say about money? It's not what makes us rich," Lily recited, smiling. "Love and kindness are better than gold." "That's my girl." Jack felt a surge of pride. Despite their struggles, Lily had grown into such a compassionate child. "Now, finish your dinner, and then we can read a chapter of your book before bed." Across town, in her penthouse apartment, Vivian Hart stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights twinkle below. The crystal wine glass in her hand caught the light, casting red shadows on her silk blouse. She took another sip of the expensive Cabernet, trying to wash away the unsettling feelings that had plagued her all day. Those eyes. Jack Reynolds' steady, determined gaze kept appearing in her mind. No hint of intimidation or submission, despite her best efforts to maintain her usual air of superiority. Just quiet confidence and something else. Dignity, perhaps? Ridiculous, she muttered to herself, turning away from the window. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she paced her immaculate living room. The space was professionally decorated in cool grays and whites, every piece selected for its elegance and cost. Perfect, like everything else in her life. Until today. Until a small-town mechanic had done the impossible and cracked her carefully maintained facade. Vivian set her wine glass down harder than necessary on the glass coffee table. "It's just business," she told herself firmly. "A temporary solution to maintain the company's image." But her mind betrayed her, replaying the moment the engine had roared to life. The genuine joy on his employees' faces. The way he'd explained the repair without a hint of arrogance or showmanship, so different from the executives she dealt with daily. Always posturing, always performing. "Stop it," she commanded herself, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "He's just a mechanic, a consultant, temporary." Yet as she moved to refill her glass, she caught her reflection in the window. For the first time in years, she looked uncertain. Back in his small living room, Jack sat on the worn but comfortable couch, a notepad balanced on his knee. The television played quietly in the background, showing some cartoon Lily loved. His daughter lay curled up beside him, her breathing growing steadier as sleep began to claim her. Jack looked down at his notes, trying to organize his thoughts for tomorrow. He'd written down everything he could remember about the company's fleet vehicles, making diagrams and lists of potential improvements. His military training had taught him the importance of being prepared, of having a plan. "Daddy?" Lily's sleepy voice interrupted his writing. "Is Miss Hart pretty?" The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because when you talked about her at dinner, you made your serious face." Lily yawned, snuggling closer. "The one you make when something's important." Jack set his notepad aside and brushed her hair back from her forehead. "Miss Hart is my boss now, honey. That's why I was serious. It's important to do a good job." "Mm-hmm," Lily mumbled, her eyes drifting closed. "But she is pretty. I saw her today. She looks like a queen." Jack watched as his daughter's breathing evened out completely, her face peaceful in sleep. He thought about Vivian Hart, with her perfectly tailored suits and commanding presence. Yes, she was beautiful, but it was a cold beauty, like a marble statue in a museum, meant to be admired from a distance. Picking up his notepad again, Jack returned to his preparations. Tomorrow would be challenging enough without dwelling on his new boss's appearance. He had a job to do, a daughter to provide for, and his dignity to maintain. The clock on the wall ticked steadily as Jack continued writing, his daughter's warm presence beside him a reminder of everything that truly mattered. Through the window, he could see the distant glow of downtown, where tomorrow he would step into Vivian Hart's world. But for now, in this quiet moment with Lily, he was exactly where he needed to be. The gleaming glass towers of the Hart Company headquarters stretched toward the morning sky, a world away from Jack's humble auto shop. He tugged at the collar of his freshly pressed blue button-down shirt, the nicest one he owned, and adjusted the simple black tie he'd bought yesterday at the department store. His worn brown leather shoes, polished to their best shine, clicked against the marble floor of the lobby. A young receptionist gave him a puzzled look as he approached. "Can I help you, sir?" "Jack Reynolds. I'm here for the fleet consulting position." He kept his voice steady, though his heart hammered in his chest. Her eyes widened with recognition. "Oh, you're the mechanic who—" She caught herself and quickly typed something into her computer. "Please take the elevator to the 32nd floor. Miss Hart's assistant will meet you." The elevator ride felt endless. Jack studied his reflection in the mirrored walls, noting how different he looked from the executives who stepped in and out, carrying designer briefcases and wearing tailored suits that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He held on to the simple folder containing his ideas, reminding himself that knowledge and ability mattered more than appearances. The elevator doors opened to reveal a bustling open office space. Sleek desks with dual monitors lined the windows, while glass-walled conference rooms punctuated the interior. A slim man in a perfectly fitted gray suit approached. "Mr. Reynolds? I'm David, Miss Hart's assistant. The morning meeting starts in 5 minutes. Follow me, please." Jack followed David into a large conference room where about 15 people sat around a polished table. Some wore friendly expressions, others barely glanced up from their phones. Vivian sat at the head of the table, elegant in a navy blazer, her posture commanding attention. "Mr. Reynolds," she said coolly, "please take a seat. We're discussing the fleet efficiency proposals today." Jack settled into an empty chair, acutely aware of the whispers and sidelong glances. A young executive was presenting charts about fuel consumption when Vivian interrupted. "These projections seem optimistic. Thoughts, Mr. Reynolds?" Her tone carried a hint of challenge. Jack cleared his throat and opened his folder. "Actually, I noticed some practical issues that could improve efficiency immediately." He pulled out several diagrams he'd drawn by hand. "The current maintenance schedule doesn't account for how different driving conditions affect wear and tear." A few people leaned forward with interest as he explained his observations. Jack pointed to specific problems he'd noticed while servicing their vehicles, suggesting simple but effective solutions. "If we adjust the maintenance intervals based on actual usage patterns," he continued, "we could extend vehicle life by at least 30%. "That's actually quite insightful," said an older man near Vivian, nodding thoughtfully. But a younger executive, in an expensive suit, smirked. "Fascinating. Did you prepare these drawings with crayons?" Several others snickered. Jack's face grew warm, but he kept his voice level. "No, sir. Just a pencil and 40 years of experience with engines." "Experience is valuable," Vivian cut in, though her tone remained distant. "But Mr. Reynolds, remember this is a temporary consulting position. We appreciate your practical perspective, but let's stick to reviewing the formal proposals." The words stung, but Jack simply nodded. "Yes, ma'am." He'd heard worse during his military service. What mattered was doing the job right, not winning popularity contests. The meeting continued, with Jack offering occasional insights when asked. Some of the younger executives rolled their eyes or whispered behind their hands, but a few others took notes and asked thoughtful questions. After the meeting, Jack spent hours inspecting the company's vehicle databases, making detailed notes about patterns and problems others had missed. He worked through lunch, determined to prove his worth through results rather than appearances. Late afternoon, shadows stretched across the office when Vivian approached his temporary desk. "The board has concerns," she said quietly, her heels clicking on the floor as she stood over him. "This isn't an auto shop, Mr. Reynolds. Don't mistake this opportunity for something it's not." Jack looked up at her, meeting her guarded expression. "I understand, Miss Hart. I'm here to do a job, nothing more." Something flickered in her eyes. "Respect?" Regret? But it vanished quickly. Good, that's good. She turned and walked away, her perfume lingering in the air. The office had mostly emptied by the time Jack gathered his things to leave. His back ached from sitting in an office chair all day instead of working under cars, but his mind felt sharp with purpose. He might not belong in this world of glass and steel, but he knew engines, efficiency, and hard work. That would have to be enough. The night air was cool as he walked to his truck in the parking garage. His phone showed 3 missed texts from Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor who watched Lily after school. All of them assured him Lily was fine, but refusing to go to bed until he got home. When he finally opened his front door at 9:30 p.m., Lily launched herself into his arms. "Daddy, how was it? Did you fix all their cars? Did you show them how smart you are?" Jack hugged her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "It was different, sweetheart, but I did my best. I made you something." Lily ran to the coffee table and returned with a piece of construction paper folded in half. On the front, she'd drawn what looked like him standing next to a row of cars, complete with a bright yellow sun and blue sky. Inside, in her careful third-grade handwriting, it read, "Good job, Daddy." Jack's throat tightened as he pulled her close again. "Thank you, baby girl. This is exactly what I needed." The morning sun painted golden streaks across Memorial Park's worn picnic tables. Jack watched Lily dig into her stack of Saturday morning pancakes, maple syrup creating tiny rivers between the fluffy circles. He'd packed their breakfast in an old thermal container, keeping their weekend tradition alive even with her soccer game coming up. "These are extra good today, Daddy," Lily said between bites, her legs swinging beneath the wooden bench. Her soccer uniform, bright blue with white trim, was already on, though her cleats stayed safely in her gym bag. "That's because I used your mom's recipe today," Jack replied softly, watching his daughter's eyes light up. "Found it in that old recipe box last night." Lily smiled, a small drop of syrup clinging to her chin. "She always made the best pancakes. But yours are good too, Daddy." Jack reached over with a napkin, gently wiping her face. The morning was peaceful, just the two of them, the chirping birds, and the distant shouts of early soccer practice on the field. These quiet moments meant everything to him. Lily pulled her sketchbook from her backpack, flipping through pages filled with crayon drawings. "Look what I drew in art class yesterday." She pointed to a detailed picture of their auto shop, complete with little stick figures of mechanics working on cars. "That's really good, sweetheart. You got all the details right, even the big red toolbox by the door." A sharp click of heels on concrete interrupted their moment. Jack looked up to see Vivian Hart approaching their table, dressed impeccably even for a Saturday morning in designer workout wear and sunglasses. His shoulders tensed instinctively. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, removing her sunglasses. "What a surprise." "Miss Hart," Jack nodded, keeping his voice neutral. "This is unexpected. The company is sponsoring a wellness event on the track," she explained, gesturing toward a gathering of people setting up banners near the running path. "I didn't expect to find you here." Before Jack could respond, Lily piped up. "I have a soccer game. Do you want to see my drawings?" She held up her sketchbook with unguarded enthusiasm. Something in Vivian's composed expression shifted as she looked at the little girl. I suppose I have a moment." To Jack's surprise, Vivian sat down on the bench beside Lily, careful to keep her expensive athletic wear from touching the syrup-spotted table. Lily immediately began flipping through her drawings, explaining each one with 8-year-old excitement. "This is Daddy's shop, see? And that's where he fixed your engine." Lily pointed to a crayon rendering of the garage bay. "Daddy said it was really hard, but he didn't give up because that's what heroes do." Jack watched as Vivian's usual mask of corporate confidence wavered. She studied the childish artwork with unexpected attention, asking Lily questions about the different tools she'd drawn and the cars waiting to be fixed. "You're very observant," Vivian said, her voice softer than Jack had ever heard it. "You've captured all the details." "Daddy says paying attention to details is important," Lily declared proudly. "That's how he figures out what's wrong with the cars." Jack noticed how Vivian's eyes flickered to him, then back to Lily. The morning sun caught the edges of her perfectly styled hair, but there was something different about her now sitting on a park bench, looking at a child's drawings, away from the corporate world where she wielded such power. "Your daddy is right about that," Vivian admitted, and Jack detected a note of genuine respect in her voice. A whistle blew in the distance, signaling the teams to gather for warm-ups. Lily quickly packed up her sketchbook. "That's Coach Maria! I have to go, Daddy!" Jack stood, gathering their breakfast containers. "Better get those cleats on, kiddo." Lily surprised everyone by giving Vivian a quick hug before jumping up. "You should watch our game. I'm number 7. Vivian stiffened for a moment, clearly unused to such spontaneous affection. "I have meetings to oversee," she said, but her usual sharp tone was absent. They watched as Lily ran toward the soccer field, her ponytail bouncing with each step. Jack shouldered her backpack, feeling Vivian's presence beside him. "She's quite talented," Vivian said quietly. "The drawings. She sees things others miss," Jack replied. "Beauty in simple things, like her mother did." The mention of Lily's mother hung in the air between them. Vivian's expression softened further, and for a moment, Jack glimpsed something beneath her carefully maintained facade, perhaps understanding, or even compassion. "I should check on the event setup," she said finally, but she didn't move immediately. "And I have a soccer game to watch." Jack smiled, no trace of their usual workplace tension in his voice. Vivian nodded, replacing her sunglasses. She walked away with her characteristic grace, but Jack noticed her pause near the field, watching as Lily joined her teammates in their warm-up drills. Later that morning, Vivian sat in her parked Mercedes, still at the park long after her company's event had wrapped up. She caught herself smiling, remembering Lily's detailed drawings and uninhibited hug. Her hand moved to the spot where the little girl's arms had wrapped around her waist, such a simple gesture, yet it had cracked something in her carefully constructed walls. She watched through her tinted windows as Jack lifted Lily onto his shoulders after the game, both of them laughing despite their team's loss. The sight stirred something unexpected in her chest, a warmth she thought she'd locked away years ago, after her divorce left her, believing that real love was just a fairy tale. Vivian's perfectly manicured fingers gripped her steering wheel, but she couldn't quite summon her usual cynicism. The morning's unplanned encounter had shown her a side of Jack Reynolds she hadn't allowed herself to see before, not just the stubborn mechanic who'd proved her wrong, but a father whose quiet strength came from something far more meaningful than corporate power plays. The Monday morning conference room buzzed with whispered conversations and the clink of coffee cups. Jack Reynolds stood near the window, his presentation materials neatly arranged before him. Though his weathered hands bore the familiar traces of motor oil that wouldn't quite wash away, his posture carried the unmistakable discipline of his military years. Vivian Hart swept into the room in a tailored navy suit, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Let's make this quick," she announced, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Mr. Reynolds, you have the floor." Jack nodded and moved to the front of the room. "Thank you, Miss Hart." He picked up a marker and began drawing a simple diagram on the whiteboard. "Our current maintenance schedule is costing us both time and money. I've developed a system that could cut our downtime by 40%. A few executives exchanged skeptical glances. One of them, a man with silver-streaked hair, didn't bother hiding his smirk. But Jack continued, his voice steady and sure. "Right now, we're reactive. We wait for problems to develop. My proposal is a predictive maintenance system based on my experience with military vehicles." He outlined his plan with precise, practical details. "This is all very basic," Vivian interrupted, her manicured fingers drumming against the table. "Surely our current systems are more sophisticated than what you're suggesting." "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one," Jack replied, meeting her gaze. "May I demonstrate?" He pulled out a small mechanical model he'd built over the weekend, while Lily had been coloring beside him. Using it, he showed exactly how his system would work. The room grew quiet as he explained, and even the skeptical executives began leaning forward. Sarah Chen, the head of operations, spoke up. "This could save us millions annually." Her eyes sparkled with interest. "The efficiency ratings alone." "It's untested," Vivian cut in, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Actually," said Tom from engineering, "it's similar to what Toyota implemented last year. Their results were impressive." More voices joined in, supporting Jack's proposal. He stood quietly, letting his work speak for itself. Vivian's expression shifted between frustration and grudging interest. "We'll take it under advisement," she finally said, gathering her papers. Meeting adjourned, but as people filed out, the buzz was unmistakable. Groups formed in the hallway, discussing Jack's ideas. Sarah Chen caught up with him by the elevator. "That was brilliant," she said warmly. "Simple but revolutionary for us. Some of us have been pushing for changes like this for years." Word spread quickly through the building. By lunch, Jack had received dozens of emails from department heads wanting to discuss his system further. He ate his simple sandwich at his desk, responding to each message with careful consideration. Not everyone was pleased, though. In a corner office, 3 executives huddled together, their voices low. "He's making us look bad," muttered Gerald Hayes, the silver-haired man. "A mechanic showing up our entire logistics department?" But down in her office, Vivian found herself reviewing Jack's proposal again. She'd noticed things during the meeting she hadn't wanted to admit. His patience when challenged, his clear explanations, the way he'd stayed humble even when gaining support. It wasn't just the plan that was impressive, it was his character. The afternoon brought a stream of impromptu meetings. Jack moved from department to department, answering questions and explaining details. He never talked down to anyone, whether they were senior executives or maintenance staff. His steady presence and clear expertise slowly won over even the skeptics. In the IT department, a young programmer named Miguel showed him how they could digitize his system. "This could be revolutionary," Miguel said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "We could create an app for the maintenance teams." By late afternoon, Vivian received multiple emails praising Jack's contributions. She sat at her desk, absently twirling a pen between her fingers. The man was proving to be more than just a skilled mechanic. There was a quiet wisdom in his approach that she hadn't expected. The office slowly emptied as evening approached. Jack gathered his things, his shoulders tired but his spirit lifted by the day's progress. As he walked through the parking garage, he heard quick footsteps behind him. "Mr. Reynolds," Vivian called out. He turned to face her. "Your presentation today was thorough." Coming from her, it was almost a compliment. Jack simply nodded. "Thank you, Miss Hart." "Don't let it go to your head," she added quickly, but without her usual sharp edge. "Never do," he replied with a small smile, then headed home through the gathering dusk. The streetlights were just flickering on as he rounded the corner to his modest house. A small figure burst through the front door, pigtails flying. "Daddy!" Lily launched herself into his arms. He caught her with practiced ease, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, setting her down but keeping hold of her hand. "Ready for our evening walk?" Lily nodded eagerly, already pulling him toward their usual route. As they strolled under the golden glow of the streetlights, she chattered about her day, the story they'd read in class, the picture she'd drawn at recess, the math problem she'd solved all by herself. Jack listened, his heart full. The complexities of the corporate world felt far away now, replaced by this simple moment with his daughter. They walked together in the growing twilight, their shadows stretching long behind them on the sidewalk. The elementary school auditorium hummed with excitement as parents and children filed in for the Veterans Day performance. Handmade paper flags decorated the walls, and a large "Thank You Veterans" banner hung above the stage in wobbly kid writing. Jack sat in the back row, straightening his tie. He hadn't worn his dress uniform in years, but Lily had begged him to wear it tonight. The familiar weight of the medals on his chest brought back memories. Some he'd rather forget, others that reminded him why service mattered. "Daddy, you came!" Lily burst through the auditorium doors, her face lighting up at the sight of him. She wore a star-spangled dress and carried a stack of programs. Behind her, to Jack's surprise, stood Vivian Hart. Miss Hart said she'd come too. Lily bounced on her toes. "I invited her yesterday when she was leaving the office. Is that okay?" Jack nodded, managing a smile despite his surprise. "Of course, sweetheart." Vivian looked different outside the office. Her usual sharp business attire was replaced by a simple blue dress, and her expression seemed softer somehow. Lily was very persuasive. She said, the hint of a genuine smile playing at her lips. She said I absolutely couldn't miss her big performance. "Front row seats." Lily grabbed both their hands, pulling them forward. Jack noticed how Vivian tensed at the contact, but didn't pull away from his daughter's enthusiasm. The lights dimmed, and Mrs. Peterson, the music teacher, stepped onto the stage. "Welcome everyone to our annual Veterans Day celebration. Tonight, our students will honor those who've served our country." The show began with the kindergartners singing "America the Beautiful." Jack watched Lily fidget in line with her classmates, waiting for their turn. When the third grade class took the stage, she stood tall and proud. "My daddy is a hero." Lily's clear voice rang out as she stepped forward for her solo part. He served in the army and fixed broken trucks so soldiers could come home safe. Her eyes found Jack's in the audience. He says being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right anyway. Jack felt his throat tighten. Beside him, he heard Vivian's sharp intake of breath. The children performed a medley of patriotic songs. Then Mrs. Peterson returned to the microphone. We have several veterans in our audience tonight. Would you please stand when I call your name? Jack listened as other names were called. Mr. Thompson, who'd served in the Navy. Mrs. Rodriguez from the Air Force. Then, Staff Sergeant Jack Reynolds, United States Army. He stood, and Lily beamed from the stage. The spotlight found him, and he heard scattered applause turn into something stronger. These weren't the polished executives from Vivian's world, but honest working folks who understood what service meant. Sergeant Reynolds has agreed to say a few words, Mrs. Peterson announced. Jack hadn't planned on speaking, but Lily's encouraging nod drew him forward. He walked to the stage, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. The familiar discipline of military bearing straightened his spine as he faced the audience. Thank you, he began simply. When I served, I learned that true strength isn't about power or status. It's about having faith when things seem impossible. About fixing what's broken, whether that's an engine or a promise. His voice grew stronger. Every day, I try to teach my daughter that dignity isn't found in fancy titles or big offices. It's found in doing honest work, in keeping your word, and in serving others. He glanced at Lily, who watched him with shining eyes. My daughter calls me her hero, but the real heroes are in this room. They're teachers, showing kids to be kind. Parents working 2 jobs to give their children better lives. And yes, veterans who served because they believed in something bigger than themselves. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was heartfelt. As Jack returned to his seat, he saw Vivian quickly wipe her eyes with the back of her hand. After the show, parents and children mingled over punch and cookies. Lily ran off to join her friends, leaving Jack and Vivian standing awkwardly near the refreshment table. I've never heard you speak like that before, Vivian said finally, her voice unusually quiet. Haven't had much reason to at the office, Jack replied. No, I suppose not. She watched as Lily showed her friends the medals on Jack's uniform. She really adores you. She's all I have, Jack said simply. Vivian's perfectly manicured fingers twisted the program in her hands. The men I know. They talk about quarterly profits and hostile takeovers. Their children have nannies and trust funds. She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. I've never seen this. Jack understood what she couldn't quite say. In his world, success wasn't measured in dollar signs, but in the way Lily's face lit up when he helped with her homework, in the satisfaction of fixing something everyone else had given up on. Parents began gathering their children, heading home for the night. Lily ran back to give Jack a fierce hug before joining her teacher to help clean up. Vivian stood apart, watching them with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Thank you for coming, he said. It meant a lot to Lily. Vivian nodded, still looking somewhat shaken. I should go, she said, but didn't move. She stared at the children's artwork on the walls, the simple decorations, the proud parents hugging their kids. This is all so real. The word seemed to surprise her as much as it did Jack. Before he could respond, she turned abruptly and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. At the door, she paused, looking back at the scene one last time before disappearing into the night. The city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds through the floor to ceiling windows of Vivian Hart's penthouse. She sat in her designer armchair, still wearing her work clothes from the school event, a gray silk blouse and pencil skirt that cost more than most people's monthly salary. An untouched glass of red wine sat on the marble side table, gathering condensation. Her perfectly manicured fingers traced the edge of a program from the Veterans Day play. Lily had pressed it into her hands earlier, insisting she keep it as a souvenir. The child's bright eyes and genuine smile had caught her off guard, much like everything else about the Reynolds family. What am I doing? Vivian muttered to herself, standing up to pace the immaculate hardwood floors. Her heels clicked against the surface, echoing in the empty space. The penthouse was beautiful, staged like a magazine spread, but tonight it felt especially hollow. The memory of her ex-husband Richard flooded back uninvited. He'd been perfect on paper, Harvard MBA, old money, connections in all the right places. Their wedding had made the society pages. But behind closed doors, he'd been cruel, manipulative, using her success against her while carrying on affairs with younger women. Vivian stopped at the large window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. "You promised yourself you'd never be fooled again," she whispered. The city stretched endlessly below, a maze of lights and shadows. Men like that, they're all the same. They see a successful woman, and they want to. Her voice trailed off. But Jack Reynolds wasn't anything like Richard. The thought surfaced despite her attempts to suppress it. She'd watched him today, standing tall in his worn combat boots and simple dress shirt, while other veterans wore expensive suits. There had been no pretense, no showing off, just quiet dignity as he spoke about service and sacrifice. "Stop it!" she commanded herself, walking to her home office. The walls were lined with awards and achievements, proof of her rise to power. She picked up a framed magazine cover featuring her stern expression and the headline, "Ice Queen of Industry, How Vivian Hart Built Her Empire." The memory of Richard's mocking voice echoed, "You're too cold, Vivian. Too focused on work. No wonder I had to look elsewhere." She'd channeled that pain into her career, building walls so high no one could scale them. But today, watching Jack with Lily, across town, in a modest two-bedroom house with creaking floorboards, Jack Reynolds knelt beside Lily's bed. Her room was warm and cozy, decorated with crayon drawings and a few cherished photos. A small desk lamp cast a gentle glow over them both. "Ready for prayer, sweetheart?" Jack asked softly, smoothing Lily's blanket. "Yes, Daddy." Lily clasped her hands together. "Can we pray for Miss Hart, too?" Jack's heart squeezed. "Of course we can. She looked sad today," Lily continued thoughtfully. Even when she was smiling, Jack closed his eyes, remembering how Vivian's carefully maintained facade had cracked during his speech. For just a moment, he'd glimpsed something vulnerable in her expression. "Dear God," he began, his voice steady and warm. "Thank you for this day, and for letting me serve my country. Thank you for my beautiful daughter Lily, who makes every day brighter." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And please watch over Miss Hart. Help her find peace and joy in her heart. And help her not be lonely anymore," Lily added sleepily. Jack's throat tightened. "Amen," he whispered, kissing Lily's forehead. She was asleep within minutes, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. He made his way to the small living room, sinking into his old armchair. The contrast between this space and Vivian's world couldn't be starker. His furniture was well worn but clean, the walls needed fresh paint, and the carpet had seen better days. But there was love here, and peace. The memories of combat still haunted him sometimes, the explosions, the loss of friends, the weight of responsibility. But his faith had carried him through the darkness. That same faith helped him face each day's challenges with grace, even when people like Vivian looked down on him. Jack pulled out his worn Bible, finding comfort in its familiar pages. He didn't pray for success or wealth. Instead, he asked for strength to maintain his dignity, to be a good father, and to show kindness even to those who showed him none. Back in her penthouse, Vivian found herself in her walk-in closet, surrounded by designer labels and perfect order. Her fingers brushed against a simple cotton handkerchief tucked away in a drawer, the only thing she'd kept from her grandmother. The old woman had always said, "True worth isn't in what you own, but in what you give." She sank onto the closet's built-in bench, suddenly exhausted by the weight of her defensive armor. Jack's words from the speech echoed in her mind. Service isn't about recognition. It's about doing what's right, even when no one's watching. The handkerchief felt soft against her fingers as she dabbed at unexpected tears. In the distance, a church bell chimed 9 times. The sound carried faintly through the thick windows, reminding her of Sunday mornings long ago, before ambition and hurt had hardened her heart. "Maybe," Vivian whispered to the empty room, her voice barely audible. "Maybe I was wrong about him." She sat there in the silence, surrounded by all the trappings of success, while across town, a little girl slept peacefully, and her father read by lamplight, both of them rich in ways Vivian was only beginning to understand. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the Hart Company's executive floor, but the warmth didn't reach the conference room where Mr. Dane stood before the board members. His perfectly pressed suit matched his calculated smile as he placed a thick folder on the polished mahogany table. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, his voice smooth as honey but laced with concern. "I've discovered some troubling information about our newest consultant, Mr. Reynolds." Vivian sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of professional detachment. Inside, her stomach tightened. Mr. Dane clicked through his presentation. Medical records, financial statements, and military documents flashed across the screen. Mr. Reynolds has a documented history of PTSD from his military service, multiple incidents of night terrors, anxiety attacks, and, he paused for effect, regular visits to the VA hospital for counseling. Murmurs rippled through the room. One board member adjusted his tie nervously. "Furthermore," Dane continued, "he's been living paycheck to paycheck. 3 times in the past year he's barely avoided foreclosure on his modest home. His daughter's medical insurance is subsidized by the state." Outside in the hallway, Jack was heading to his temporary office, carrying a stack of maintenance reports. He slowed as he passed the conference room. Fragments of conversation drifting through the partially open door. "A liability to the company," Dane's voice carried clearly. "Unstable background." "What about his daughter?" a female board member asked. "A single father with his condition." Jack's hands tightened on the reports, his knuckles turning white. The stack suddenly felt heavy as lead. Inside, Vivian's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm under the table. "Mr. Dane," she said, her voice sharp, "how did you obtain these private records?" Dane's smile didn't waver. "Through perfectly legal channels, I assure you. As Senior VP of Risk Management, it's my duty to protect this company's interests." "His work has been exemplary," Vivian countered, surprising herself with the heat in her voice. "For now," Dane agreed smoothly. "But what happens when the pressure builds? When a veteran with documented PTSD faces a crisis? The publicity alone could devastate our stock prices." Jack forced himself to walk away, each step feeling like he was wading through concrete. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the hallway too narrow. He remembered similar whispers from other jobs, other opportunities that slipped away when people learned about his past. Throughout the day, he noticed the changes. The way conversation stopped when he entered the break room, how people avoided eye contact in meetings, the sympathetic glances from some, the wary looks from others. By afternoon, the whispers had spread through every floor. A secretary clutched her purse tighter when he passed. An executive hurriedly rescheduled their one-on-one meeting. At his desk, Jack stared at the maintenance schedule he'd created, the one that could save the company millions. It didn't matter now. His shoulders slumped as he remembered Vivian's words from his first day. "You're just temporary." He'd been foolish to think he could belong here, in this world of polished marble and designer suits. The familiar weight of shame settled on his chest, not for who he was, but for daring to dream of something more. At 5 o'clock, he shut down his computer and gathered his things. As he walked through the lobby, he heard 2 employees by the water cooler. "Can you imagine? PTSD? And they let him work on our fleet? Poor man's daughter. Must be so hard." The cool evening air hit his face as he exited the building. The walk to Lily's after-school program seemed longer than usual. When he arrived, she bounded toward him with her usual enthusiasm, her backpack bouncing. "Daddy." She hugged him tight, then looked up with those clear, trusting eyes. "Can we get ice cream?" "Not today, sweetheart." His voice came out rougher than he intended. They walked home hand in hand, past the shops and cafes where people sat enjoying their after-work drinks. Lily skipped occasionally, chattering about her day, but gradually fell quiet as she sensed her father's mood. Finally, she squeezed his hand. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby? How come you're so quiet today?" Jack looked down at his daughter. This precious soul who never saw him as broken or damaged, who didn't know that her daddy sometimes woke up in cold sweats fighting battles long past. She saw him only as her hero, her protector, the one who could fix anything. "Just thinking," he managed, giving her hand a gentle squeeze back. They continued walking as the evening shadows lengthened around them, each step taking them further from the gleaming corporate tower where Jack's dreams lay scattered like broken glass on a polished floor. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished mahogany conference table where Vivian Hart sat, surrounded by her board members. Their faces were stern, documents spread before them like weapons ready for battle. "Miss Hart," Mr. Dane began, his voice carrying a false note of concern, "we need to discuss the situation with Mr. Reynolds." He slid a folder across the table. His presence here is becoming problematic. Vivian's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Jack Reynolds has improved our fleet efficiency by 30%. This isn't about numbers, Barbara Chen, another board member, cut in. It's about image. A mechanic with PTSD? Financial troubles? The media would have a field day. Not to mention, Thomas Wilson added, leaning forward, the rumors about your personal involvement. Vivian's spine stiffened. There is no personal involvement. Nevertheless, Mr. Dane continued, the perception exists. Our shareholders are nervous. Your leadership is being questioned. Outside the conference room, Jack approached with his latest maintenance report. He slowed his steps, hearing raised voices through the partially open door. This company represents excellence, Vivian, Barbara pressed. We can't have someone like him. Someone like him? Vivian's voice held a dangerous edge. Be reasonable, Mr. Dane smoothly interrupted. You've built this company on exceptional standards. Don't let misplaced sympathy compromise everything you've worked for. Jack stood frozen, his heart pounding. He shouldn't listen, but his feet wouldn't move. Inside, Vivian rose from her chair, pacing the length of the window. The city sprawled below, a maze of buildings and streets that suddenly felt suffocating. She thought of Jack's quiet dignity, of Lily's bright smile. Then she thought of her father's words before he died. Never let them see weakness, princess. The business world devours the soft-hearted. The board watched her, waiting. In their eyes, she saw judgment, calculation, and the implicit threat of lost confidence in her leadership. Miss Hart, Mr. Dane said softly, it's time to make a choice. The conference room door swung open. Several employees entered for the scheduled department meeting, including Jack. Their chatter died as they sensed the tension in the room. Vivian turned, her face a mask of corporate coolness. Her eyes met Jack's, and something inside her cracked. But her voice, when it came, was steel. Mr. Reynolds, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, let's be clear about your position here. You are a temporary mechanic, nothing more. Don't mistake this arrangement for anything beyond that. The words hung in the air like shards of glass. Jack stood very still, his report clutched in his hands. The silence stretched, heavy with betrayal. Yes, ma'am, he finally said, his voice quiet but steady. I never did. He placed the report on a side table and walked out, his back straight, his steps measured, just like leaving the battlefield. No running, no looking back, no showing pain. Vivian watched him go, victory tasting like ashes in her mouth. The board members exchanged satisfied glances. Mr. Dane nodded approvingly. Well handled, he murmured. But Vivian barely heard him. She was remembering Lily's drawing, still tucked in her desk drawer. 3 stick figures holding hands labeled Daddy, me, and Miss Vivian. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jack worked silently in the garage level, checking engines with mechanical precision. No one approached him. No one needed to. Evening came, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Jack drove home in his old truck, each mile taking him further from the gleaming corporate towers and closer to his small, honest world. Lily was waiting on the porch steps, homework spread around her like fallen leaves. She looked up as he parked, her face brightening. Daddy, did you see Miss Vivian today? Can she come to my next soccer game? I made her a new drawing and... Jack knelt before his daughter, gathering her small hands in his. They were warm, trusting, innocent of the world's cruel judgments. Baby, he said softly, we need to talk. Lily's smile faded as she studied his face. Daddy, what's wrong? Jack sat beside her on the steps, pulling her close. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. Sometimes, he began, choosing his words carefully, people live in different worlds. And sometimes, no matter how hard we try, those worlds don't mix. Like oil and water in science class? Something like that. He managed a small smile. Miss Vivian, she lives in a different world than us. A world of fancy offices and important meetings. But you work there now, Lily protested. And she smiled at my drawing. Jack closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of his daughter's hope. I was just helping out for a while. But we don't belong in her world, sweetheart. We belong here, in our home, with people who, he swallowed hard, with people who see us for who we really are. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then her lower lip trembled. "But I thought maybe." "I know, baby. I know." The first tear slid down Lily's cheek. Jack gathered her into his arms, holding her tight as she cried. Her tears soaked into his work shirt, and he rocked her gently, just as he had when she was tiny. "We'll be okay," he whispered. "We've got each other. That's all we need." But as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jack's own eyes burned with unshed tears. Not for himself, but for the hope he'd allowed himself to feel, and for the daughter who had dared to dream of a family made whole again. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Jack's auto shop, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Tools clinked against metal as he worked mechanically on an old Chevy, his movements precise but lacking their usual energy. His phone sat silent on the workbench, its screen dark. He'd stopped checking it days ago after seeing Vivian's number flash across it too many times. "Daddy?" Lily's voice echoed from her usual corner, where a small desk held her schoolwork. "Yes, sweetheart?" Jack wiped his hands on a rag, trying to inject warmth into his voice. "You don't smile anymore." Her blue eyes studied him with that unnerving wisdom that sometimes made her seem older than her 8 years. Jack's chest tightened. "Just tired, that's all." He forced a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Lily set down her pencil and pulled something from her backpack, pink paper and her favorite rainbow pen. She began writing intently, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "Homework?" Jack asked, turning back to the engine. "Sort of," she replied mysteriously. "It's important." Throughout the morning, customers came and went. Jack handled their repairs with his usual skill, but his responses were shorter, his laugh absent. Some of the regulars noticed, exchanging concerned glances when they thought he wasn't looking. During lunch break, while Jack was absorbed in paperwork, Lily carefully folded her pink paper into an envelope. She pulled an address from her jacket pocket. She'd written it down days ago from one of her dad's work papers. With determined focus, she copied it onto the envelope. "Mrs. Martinez?" she called to the shop secretary. "Could you help me mail this? It's really important." The elderly woman smiled warmly. "Of course, Mahita. Special letter?" Lily nodded solemnly. "It's to help Daddy smile again." In her corner office, 40 floors above the city, Vivian Hart sat rigid behind her desk. The morning sun caught the crystal paperweight before her, scattering rainbow patterns across stacks of unsigned contracts. Her usually immaculate desk showed signs of distraction. Coffee cups from different times of day, papers slightly askew. Her intercom buzzed. "Miss Hart, there's a personal letter for you." Vivian frowned. "Personal?" "Yes, ma'am. Pink envelope. From a Lily Reynolds." The name hit her like a physical blow. Her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the intercom. "Bring it in." The envelope was indeed pink, covered in small heart stickers. The address was written in careful children's handwriting, complete with a backwards. Vivian opened it slowly, something tight and uncomfortable building in her chest. The letter inside was written in rainbow-colored ink. "Dear Miss Hart, I know you're a queen. That's what Daddy called you once when he thought I was sleeping. He said you were beautiful and smart like a queen, but you made him sad. Daddy doesn't need a queen, but I think you need a hero, and he's mine. He fixes things when they're broken, not just cars. He fixed my heart when Mommy went to heaven. He fixes Mrs. Martinez's chair when it squeaks. He even fixed your impossible engine. But now he doesn't smile anymore. He thinks we're not good enough for your world. But Daddy taught me that being good isn't about having fancy things. It's about having a good heart. You have a good heart too. I saw it at my play when you cried, even though you tried to hide it. Daddy says, sometimes people are mean because they're scared of getting hurt. Are you scared, Miss Hart? Daddy is my hero because he's brave, even when he's scared. Maybe he could be your hero too. Love, Lily Reynolds. P.S. He still keeps the picture of you from the newspaper in his drawer, the one where you're smiling for real." Vivian's hands shook as she read the letter a second time, then a third. The words blurred before her eyes as something hot and wet rolled down her cheek. She touched it in surprise. She hadn't cried since her father's funeral 5 years ago. More tears followed, breaking through years of carefully constructed walls. She thought of Jack's quiet strength, his unwavering dignity in the face of mockery. She remembered how he looked at the Veterans Day play, standing tall in his old uniform while Lily beamed with pride. The sobs came harder now, her shoulders shaking. Through the tears, she saw herself clearly for the first time in years, not as the untouchable queen of her corporate kingdom, but as a woman who had let fear master her heart, who had pushed away genuine love because it didn't fit her carefully controlled world. Her makeup ran in dark streams down her face as she clutched Lily's letter to her chest. The rainbow ink smeared slightly where her tears fell, but the words remained clear, a child's wisdom cutting through all her adult defenses. "Miss Hart?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The board is waiting for the quarterly meeting." Vivian didn't respond. She couldn't. She just sat there, years of pent-up emotion flowing freely down her face, while a little girl's words echoed in her mind. "I think you need a hero, and he's mine." Vivian's heels clicked against the empty sidewalk as she wandered through the city's financial district. The towering buildings that usually made her feel powerful now loomed over her like silent judges. The night air was crisp, and her designer coat offered little comfort against the hollow feeling in her chest. She paused at a window, catching her reflection. Perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. The image of success she'd crafted so carefully. But Lily's letter burned in her coat pocket, making all of it feel hollow. "Daddy doesn't need a queen, but I think you need a hero, and he's mine." The words echoed in her mind as she walked past the darkened storefronts. A small auto repair shop caught her eye. Nothing like Jack's, but enough to trigger the memory of that first day. She'd been so smug, so certain of her superiority when she'd issued that mocking challenge. "Fix this engine one, everyone else said was impossible, and I'll marry you." But he had fixed it. Vivian stopped walking, remembering the quiet confidence in his eyes that morning. No boasting, no gloating, just dignity and determination. She'd never met anyone like that in her corporate world of sharp elbows and sharper tongues. A couple passed by, walking hand in hand, their laughter floating on the night air. Vivian watched them disappear around a corner, remembering how Lily's small hand had slipped into hers at the Veterans Day play. The child's trust had been so pure, so unquestioning. And Jack, the way he'd spoken about service and sacrifice, without a trace of self-pity or resentment. "My hero," Lily had called him. Vivian could see why now. She found herself in the small park where she usually ate lunch alone. The bench felt cold beneath her as she sat down, pulling out her phone. The screen lit up with unanswered calls to Jack's number. Pride had stopped her from leaving messages. Pride, her constant companion, her shield, her prison. The memory of her failed marriage surfaced, threatening to strengthen her walls again. Richard had been from her world, wealthy, polished, perfect on paper. He'd also been cruel, unfaithful, and ultimately cowardly. She'd sworn never to be vulnerable again. But Jack was different. She thought of his calloused hands, gentle with Lily's drawings, but strong enough to rebuild broken engines. His eyes that held pain but never bitterness. His quiet strength that made her sharp words seem small and mean. A tear rolled down her cheek, surprising her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. The corporate queen, they called her. Ice Queen, some whispered. She'd worn those titles like armor, but now they felt like chains. Standing up, Vivian walked to the edge of the park, where the city lights blurred through her tears. She remembered Lily's laughter echoing through the office halls, bringing life to the sterile space. She thought of Jack's subtle smile when his maintenance system proved successful, taking no pleasure in proving his critics wrong. "You're just temporary," she'd said to him, bowing to the board's pressure. The memory made her stomach turn. She'd become exactly what she despised, someone who valued appearance over substance, position over principle. The night grew colder, but Vivian kept walking, past her favorite restaurants where she ate alone, past the luxury shops where she bought things she didn't need, past all the symbols of success that suddenly meant nothing. She thought of Jack's small house, warm with love despite its modest size, of Lily's artwork proudly displayed on the fridge, of the peace she'd felt there, so different from her empty penthouse. At midnight, she found herself back at her building. The doorman nodded respectfully, but she barely noticed. In her apartment, she went straight to her closet, past the designer suits and dresses to the back, where a simple sweater hung, the one she'd worn to Lily's soccer game. Vivian held it, remembering how natural it had felt to sit in the grass that day, cheering with Jack as Lily played. No pretense, no performance. Just real moments with real people who saw her as a person, not a position. She moved to her window, looking out at the city she'd conquered. All her achievements, her carefully constructed walls, her protection against pain, they felt meaningless now. She thought of the life she could have, not of boardroom victories, but of family dinners, soccer games, and genuine laughter. Her phone buzzed. Another board member, probably with more concerns about her image. She declined the call. For the first time in years, she knew exactly what she wanted, and it wasn't their approval. Vivian walked to her desk and opened her laptop. A few quick keystrokes, and her calendar for tomorrow cleared. She looked at the time. 1 a.m. In a few hours, she would drive to Jackstown. No driver, no armor of expensive clothes, no practiced speeches. Just truth, just her heart, just hope. She had spent years building walls to keep pain out, never realizing she'd also locked joy away. But a little girl with a rainbow pen and a father with quiet strength had shown her a better way. As she prepared for bed, Vivian touched Lily's letter one more time. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She was done hiding behind pride and fear. It was time to be brave in a way that had nothing to do with business deals or corporate takeovers. It was time to fight for something real. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jack's auto shop as he worked under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's old Buick. Sweat dampened his gray t-shirt and grease stained his capable hands. The familiar sense of motor oil and metal surrounded him, bringing a small measure of comfort after days of turmoil. A few neighbors stood chatting near their porches, enjoying the mild spring weather. Mr. Wilson watered his front lawn while his wife deadheaded flowers in their garden. It was a typical, peaceful evening in their modest neighborhood, until the sleek black Mercedes turned onto their street. The luxury car's engine purred as it pulled up to the curb. Jack's hands stilled on the wrench he was holding. He knew that car. He'd fixed its supposedly impossible engine just weeks ago, starting this whole complicated mess. The car door opened, and Vivian Hart stepped out. She looked different from her usual polished corporate appearance. Her designer suit was replaced by a simple blue dress, and her face showed signs of emotion he'd never seen before. The neighbors stopped their activities, watching with undisguised curiosity. "Jack!" Vivian called out, her voice carrying across the yard. She walked toward him with purpose, but without her usual sharp confidence. "I need to talk to you." Jack straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Miss Hart," he said formally, "I thought we'd said everything that needed saying." "No." She shook her head, stepping closer. "I did all the talking before, and I was wrong. So wrong." The screen door of Jack's house creaked open, and Lily appeared on the porch, her eyes wide as she spotted Vivian. She hung back, watching intently. "I've been proud and foolish," Vivian continued, her voice wavering slightly. "I built walls around myself years ago, convinced that success meant never letting anyone close. Then you came along, this quiet, dignified man who fixed an impossible engine just because I mockingly challenged him to." Jack's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it because of your challenge. I did it because it was the right thing to do. I know that now," Vivian said softly. "That's exactly what I've learned about you. You do what's right, not what's easy or what looks good to others." She took another step forward. "You showed me what real strength looks like, not in grand gestures or power plays, but in the way you love your daughter, the way you hold your head high despite others' judgment, the way you keep your faith when life is hard." The neighbors had grown completely still, hanging on every word. Mrs. Wilson had abandoned her flowers entirely. "Jack," Vivian's voice cracked slightly, "you fixed more than an engine. You fixed my heart. You showed me what I'd forgotten. That true worth isn't measured in bank accounts or boardroom victories. It's measured in integrity, in kindness, in the courage to remain gentle in a harsh world." Jack's expression softened slightly, but wariness remained in his eyes. He'd been hurt too deeply to trust easily. "Pretty words," he said quietly, "but words are easy." "Daddy?" Lily's voice rang out as she suddenly darted from the porch, running toward them. She stopped between them, looking up at Vivian with hope shining in her eyes. "Do you really mean it? Are you sorry for being mean to Daddy?" Vivian knelt down to Lily's level, not caring that her expensive dress touched the oil-stained concrete. "Yes, sweetheart, I mean every word. I was scared of letting people see the real me, so I hurt your daddy to keep him away. That was wrong of me." Lily studied her face carefully, with that pure, unflinching honesty that only children possess. "Daddy says everyone deserves a second chance if they're really sorry." "Your daddy is very wise." Vivian smiled softly, then stood to face Jack again. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know my behavior at the office was inexcusable, but I'm here, humbling myself in front of you and your neighbors, asking for one anyway." Jack set down his wrench and took a step closer, searching her eyes intently. Gone was the cold corporate mask she usually wore. Instead, he saw vulnerability, sincerity, and something that looked remarkably like hope. "If you're serious," he said slowly, his voice deep and earnest, "this isn't a joke anymore. No more games, no more public humiliation, no more protecting your image at our expense." Vivian met his gaze steadily and nodded. "No more games," she agreed softly. "Just truth and hope. And maybe, if you're willing, a fresh start." Lily reached out and took both their hands in hers, her small fingers linking them together as they stood in the golden evening light. The aroma of homemade spaghetti and garlic bread filled Jack's modest kitchen. Lily had insisted on setting the table with their fancy plates, the ones with tiny blue flowers around the edges that they usually saved for holidays. She'd even folded paper napkins into triangles, something she'd learned at school. Vivian sat at their small kitchen table, looking both elegant and somehow vulnerable in her designer dress. Her usual commanding presence had softened, and she glanced around the warm, lived-in space with genuine interest. Family photos lined the walls, along with Lily's artwork and a few of Jack's military commendations. "I hope you like spaghetti," Jack said, placing the steaming pot on the table. "It's Lily's specialty. She helps stir the sauce." "I put in this secret ingredient," Lily announced proudly, climbing onto her chair. "But I can't tell you what it is." "Love," Jack Stage whispered to Vivian with a wink, making Lily giggle. "Dad, you weren't supposed to tell," Lily protested. But her smile showed she didn't really mind. As they began serving the food, the initial awkwardness began to melt away. Lily chatted about school, her soccer team, and how she'd helped her dad organize his tool drawer last weekend. Vivian listened intently, asking questions that showed she genuinely cared about the answers. "Your home is wonderful," Vivian said softly, looking around. "It's so alive, so different from my place." "Your apartment must be really fancy," Lily said, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Like in the movies." "It is fancy," Vivian admitted. "But sometimes fancy isn't the same as happy." She paused, pushing her food around her plate. "I've been thinking a lot about that lately." Jack watched her carefully, seeing past her perfectly applied makeup to the uncertainty beneath. "What made you come back?" he asked quietly. Lily looked between them, suddenly very still and attentive. Vivian set her fork down and took a deep breath. "I've spent so many years building walls," she said. "After my divorce, I decided that success and control were safer than letting anyone close. When I met you, Jack," she shook her head, "you challenged everything I thought I knew." "By fixing an engine?" Jack asked, but his tone was gentle. "By being real," Vivian replied. "By having dignity when I tried to mock you. By caring more about your daughter's happiness than impressing me." Her voice cracked slightly. "I made that ridiculous comment about marriage because I wanted to put you in your place. I was scared because you saw right through my act." Lily reached over and put her small hand on Vivian's. "It's okay to be scared sometimes," she said wisely. "Daddy says being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared." Tears welled in Vivian's eyes. "Your daddy is very smart," she managed. Jack cleared his throat, the motion making his voice rough. "We've all been hurt," he said. "After losing Lily's mom, after coming home from deployment, I didn't think I deserved another chance at happiness. But Lily taught me that closing your heart doesn't protect you. It just makes you lonely." "I was so wrong about you," Vivian whispered. "About everything. When I saw you at that Veterans Day play, hearing how you spoke about service and faith," she wiped at her eyes carefully. "And then I let those board members pressure me into betraying you. I'm so sorry, Jack." "I understand fear," Jack said simply. "And I believe in second chances. We all need them sometimes." "Even queens?" Lily asked innocently. Vivian laughed through her tears. Especially queens who forgot how to be human, she said, reaching for Lily's hand again. Your letter. It changed everything. You said your daddy didn't need a queen, but that I needed a hero. And he is, Lily declared. He's the best daddy ever. And he fixed that engine nobody else could fix. He fixed more than that, Vivian said, meeting Jack's eyes. He showed me what real strength looks like. It's not about power or money or control. It's about having the courage to stay kind, to keep believing in good things. Jack reached across the table and took Vivian's other hand. The past is the past, he said firmly. What matters is where we go from here. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, their simple meal forgotten, hands linked across the worn kitchen table. Lily looked at their joined hands, then at their faces, her young heart understanding more than they realized. Now we're a family, right? She asked hopefully. Jack and Vivian looked at each other through tear-filled eyes, both smiling at the pure love and acceptance in Lily's question. In that moment, the distance between their worlds, between the auto shop and the corporate office, between struggle and privilege, vanished completely. What remained was the simple truth of three hearts finding their way to each other. The morning sun painted the town square in golden light. White folding chairs formed neat rows on the freshly cut grass, and simple wildflower arrangements adorned the makeshift aisle. The old gazebo, decorated with twinkling lights and white ribbons, stood ready for its moment. Veterans in pressed uniforms gathered near the front, their medals catching the sunlight. Jack's fellow mechanics wore their Sunday best, pride evident in their faces. Even some of Vivian's corporate colleagues stood among the crowd, their designer suits looking oddly at home next to the townspeople's modest attire. Mrs. Peterson, the local florist, fussed with the flower arrangements one last time. "Never thought I'd see the day," she whispered to her husband. "That fancy CEO learning what real love looks like." Near the gazebo, Jack stood tall in his dress uniform, the same one he'd worn at the school's Veterans Day ceremony. His shoes gleamed, and his medals told silent stories of service and sacrifice. His hands, usually stained with engine grease, were clean but still showed the honest calluses of his work. Pastor Mike, who'd known Jack since his return from service, stepped up beside him. "Nervous, soldier?" Jack's smile was steady. "No, sir. For once, everything feels exactly right." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Vivian's sleek car pulled up to the square. Gone was her usual power suit and commanding stride. Instead, she emerged in a simple white dress that caught the breeze. Her usual perfect makeup was softer today, and her eyes shone with something new, vulnerability mixed with joy. But it was Lily who stole everyone's attention first. The 8-year-old practically danced down the aisle in her flower girl dress, spreading rose petals with careful concentration. Her face glowed with pure happiness as she looked from her father to Vivian and back again. "That's my dad and my new mom," she announced proudly to anyone within earshot, causing gentle laughter to ripple through the gathering. The wedding march began, played on old Mrs. Wilson's piano that had been carefully moved to the square for the occasion. Vivian began her walk, but not alone. On one side was her longest-serving employee, Thomas, who had seen her through her hardest corporate battles. On the other was Sarah, Jack's fellow veteran who had helped him through his darkest days after returning home. As Vivian approached, Jack's eyes never left hers. The woman who had once mockingly promised to marry him if he fixed an impossible engine now walked toward him with purpose and love. Her usual mask of corporate confidence had melted into something real and raw. Pastor Mike cleared his throat and addressed the gathering. "We're here today not because of a challenge met or a promise kept, but because two hearts found their way to truth. Sometimes love arrives in unexpected packages, teaching us that our greatest strength lies not in our achievements or positions, but in our capacity to open our hearts." Lily stood between them, holding both their hands as they exchanged vows. Jack spoke first, his voice clear and strong. "Vivian, I didn't fix that engine to win a bet. I did it because I believe in doing what's right, even when others say it's impossible. That's how I love, completely, honestly, with everything I have. I promise to keep fixing whatever needs fixing, to stand beside you through every challenge, and to show you every day that true worth isn't measured in dollars, but in dedication." Tears glistened in Vivian's eyes as she responded. her corporate polish giving way to genuine emotion. "Jack, I came to your shop thinking I knew everything about success. You taught me I knew nothing about what truly matters. My heart was the engine I thought couldn't be fixed, but you and Lily proved me wrong. I promise to never again mistake humility for weakness, to cherish the simple moments as much as the grand ones, and to love you both with the same quiet strength you've shown me." Lily beamed up at them both, her small hands squeezing theirs tighter. The crowd watched as Pastor Mike led them through their final vows. Veterans stood straighter, remembering their own journeys home to love. Vivian's colleagues wiped away unexpected tears, seeing their boss transformed by genuine emotion. Townspeople who had watched Jack struggle as a single father now witnessed his happiness bloom. "By the power vested in me," Pastor Mike announced with a warm smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jack cupped Vivian's face gently in his work-worn hands. She reached up, placing her fingers over his, no longer concerned about maintaining her corporate image. Their kiss was sweet and pure, a promise of new beginnings. The crowd erupted in applause. Lily jumped up and down, clapping loudest of all. Veterans saluted. Townspeople cheered. Even Vivian's board members, who had once sneered at the mechanic, stood and applauded with genuine respect. In that moment, as Jack and Vivian held each other close while their guests celebrated, the distance between their worlds disappeared. There was no CEO and mechanic, no wealthy and working class, no divide between past and present. There was only love, proven possible against all odds, witnessed by a community that had watched it grow from a mocking challenge into something real and beautiful. The applause continued, echoing across the town square, celebrating not just a wedding but a reminder that true love knows no boundaries, that dignity outweighs pride, and that sometimes the most impossible engines, even hearts, just need someone who believes they're worth fixing. Morning light streamed through the kitchen windows of Jack's modest home, now warmed by Vivian's presence. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air as the newly formed family gathered around the worn wooden table for their first breakfast together. Lily sat cross-legged in her chair, still wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas, her hair slightly messy from sleep. She carefully arranged her pancakes into a smiley face with banana slices for eyes and a strawberry mouth. Jack watched his daughter with quiet joy, remembering countless mornings when it had been just the two of them. Vivian, wearing a simple cotton robe instead of her usual business attire, looked softer in the morning light. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, and she held her coffee mug with both hands, savoring its warmth. The diamond ring on her finger caught the sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the table. "These pancakes are amazing," Vivian said, genuine surprise in her voice. "I had no idea you could cook like this, Jack." Jack smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Army training isn't just about combat. You learn to make do with what you have." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Though I never thought I'd be making breakfast for my wife." "Your wife," Vivian repeated softly, testing the words. "It still feels like a dream." "The best kind of dream," Lily chimed in, maple syrup dripping down her chin. "Because it's real." They all laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth. It was a different kind of morning than any of them were used to, fuller, brighter somehow. "I've been thinking," Jack said, pouring more coffee. "With your business experience, Vivian, maybe we could expand the shop, open a second location, train more mechanics." Vivian's eyes lit up. "Actually, I've already started running some numbers." She pulled a small notebook from her robe pocket. "Your reputation for fixing impossible cases could draw customers from all over the state. We could create a specialty division for vintage cars." "Really?" Jack's voice held wonder. "You'd want to be part of that?" "Of course," Vivian replied. "It's not about the money anymore. It's about building something together." She paused, vulnerability crossing her face. "If you want me involved, that is." "Can I help too?" Lily asked eagerly. "I'm getting really good at organizing the tools." Jack reached over and ruffled her hair. "You're already the best assistant mechanic I've ever had, sweetheart." "And the best daughter?" Vivian added softly, surprising herself with how natural the words felt. Lily beamed, then grew serious. "What about Christmas? Will we have 2 trees now? And can we make cookies together?" "We can have as many trees as you want," Vivian promised. "And I might not know how to bake, but I'm willing to learn." Mom used to say learning new things makes your heart bigger, Lily said thoughtfully. A moment of silence fell, gentle and understanding. Jack's eyes grew misty, but his smile remained steady. Vivian reached across the table and took his hand. Your mom was very wise, she said to Lily, and she'd be so proud of you both. She would have liked you, Jack said quietly. You're both strong women who know your own minds. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so many years building walls, protecting herself from hurt, that she had forgotten how beautiful it felt to let love in. I was so afraid, she admitted, of being vulnerable, of trusting someone again. But you and Lily showed me that real strength isn't about being hard or cold. It's about being brave enough to try again. Jack finished, understanding in his eyes. They finished breakfast, unhurried, sharing stories and dreams. Lily told them about wanting to learn mechanics like her dad, but also business like Vivian. Jack spoke of teaching other veterans the trade, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. Vivian shared ideas for community programs, her corporate expertise now softened by compassion. After they cleared the dishes together, a simple act that felt profound in its domesticity, Lily ran to get dressed for their morning walk, a Reynolds family tradition. Ready? She announced, bouncing back into the kitchen. Can I ride on your shoulders, Daddy? Always, Jack grinned, kneeling down so she could climb up. Vivian watched them, her heart full. Just weeks ago, she had been alone in her penthouse, surrounded by expensive things but empty of real joy. Now here she was, in a humble kitchen, finding more wealth and love than she had ever known in business. Coming? Jack asked, holding out his hand to her. Vivian slipped her hand into his, feeling the strength and gentleness in his grip. Together, they stepped out into the morning air. The sun was just rising over the small town, painting the sky in shades of hope. Lily perched on Jack's shoulders, pointing out familiar sights with new excitement. Look! That's where Dad fixed your car! And there's my school! And that's where we had the wedding yesterday. They walked down the quiet street, their footsteps in perfect rhythm. Neighbors waved from their porches, genuine warmth in their greetings. Here, Vivian realized, status didn't matter. What mattered was the kind of person you chose to be. Jack squeezed her hand as they walked, his touch saying everything words couldn't. They had found something rare and precious. A second chance at love. A family built on choice rather than obligation. A future bright with possibility. The morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows behind them as they walked forward together. Lily's laughter floated down from her perch on Jack's shoulders, her joy infectious. For the first time in years, none of them were afraid of what tomorrow might bring. They were simply, perfectly, home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Reynolds, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.